She greeted me at the door the way people open windows in a storm, halfway cautious, letting in only what they can manage. Her smile lived on the surface of her face and died there, never reaching her eyes, which carried that soft, bruised distance I'd been trying not to name for months. The hallway light made everything gentle and dishonest. It hummed like a small apology we couldn't afford. Dinner sat on the counter, still warm but losing its last courage, steam lifting like thin prayers. I kissed her cheek and she flinched, or maybe my lips imagined it. I was starting to doubt the evidence of my own skin. We ate quietly, as if noise would blur the outlines of our separate thoughts. The forks made small weather against the plates, a metal drizzle. She asked about my day, and I told her about invoices and traffic, pretending those things hadn't gone weightless lately. She nodded like someone piloting a small boat through fog, hoping the horn knows where the shore is. Her phone buzzed and didn't. That was the worst part, the silence of a habit trying to appear natural. I'd started to notice the choreography. Her stepping into the bedroom to fold laundry, the half-smile that dissolved when she turned, the late showers, the careful perfume on a Tuesday. Little distances add up like pennies until they make a sound when you drop them. I told myself we were tired, that exhaustion has a smell like rain on old stone, and it had been raining for weeks. The city outside moved through its rituals. The neighbor's door slammed. Someone laughed too loudly in the stairwell. A motorcycle passed with a swipe of sound that felt like an eraser across the block. Inside, the apartment carried our history, the way an old sweater carries last winter. Familiar, stretched, still warm if you don't look at the holes. The coffee table held coasters from places we no longer visited, and a candle that smelled like a memory trying to reapply itself. I left the dishes to soak, because soaking is like postponing a decision you've already made. She leaned against the counter like a person leaning against the story they've been rehearsing. "I think I'm going to shower," she said, voice steady as a bridge that knows one beam is cracked. I nodded. "I'll check something." The words were soft, indistinct, as if spoken into a winter scarf. The apartment was a box of echoes, her footsteps, water starting, the high note of the mirror light flicking on. I walked to the hall closet where the small safe lived behind winter coats and a rolled yoga mat that had learned to be a scroll. It wasn't curiosity. Curiosity is light. This was gravity. The safe had always been ordinary. Important papers, passports, a few letters from my father, one ring that had belonged to her grandmother, envelopes labeled with our names. It had become, lately, a stand-in for a question with a combination I couldn't remember on purpose. I pressed the code like someone praying with numbers, 1 to 7 to 0 to 5, our anniversary. The lock clicked in that clean, indifferent way that makes mechanical things seem more honest than people. The door swung open and the air inside felt a degree cooler, the way truths preserve themselves. The passports were there, the letters. The ring in its velvet egg, an envelope with my name in her handwriting, the slant of the letters that always looked a fraction windblown, and beneath it, a second phone, slim and gray, asleep like a creature pretending to be a stone. The sound in my chest folded inward. My body learned a new architecture for breathing. I didn't pick it up at first. I just stared at it the way you stare at a closed door you've already walked through in a dream. From the bathroom, Water spoke in a steady voice about temperature and control. I took the phone. It woke despite itself, screen bright, asking for a passcode I didn't know and completely did. Her birthday. The day I had once lit with candles and clumsy singing. 4 digits, admission to a museum of alternates. Messages arranged themselves into a timeline of 2 people finding a language outside the grammar of home. There were photos of coffee cups with sunlight and words like miss and almost and soon, which are terrible in their innocence. There were 2 names, hers and his, Elia's. He wrote like someone guilty of honesty. "You looked away before you said it. Do you want me to stop? I'll be where you can see me leave." She wrote like someone holding both sides of a rope and deciding which burn she could live with. My thumb hovered over a thread I knew would end me carefully. The shower stopped. Silence took a breath. I locked the phone, returned it to the dark among documents that had earned their importance. She stepped into the hallway, damp hair like punctuation marks on her shoulders. "You okay?" she asked, and it was the kindest thing anyone had said all week. I nodded, because sometimes you say yes to keep from saying everything else. She reached for my arm, a small lighthouse gesture in fog, and I accepted it like a boat that knows the shore is a drawing. "Come to bed," she asked, voice a careful key in a lock that might be someone else's. "In a minute," I said and watched her go, the bedroom swallowing her like a quiet decision. I sat on the floor beside the safe, the door open, the air colder than it should have been. The envelope with my name waited, backlit by the smallest courage. I broke the seal with a sound too loud for a home we built on whispers. "Please read when you're calm," it began. The handwriting tilted like a person trying to stand on moving ground. My eyes found the words, "I'm sorry," and then lost the rest to the tide. I folded the letter back into itself, a bird unwilling to fly or be forgiven. Somewhere outside, a siren went by without urgency, as if the city had learned to triage better than we had. I closed the safe and set the numbers back to 0, as if a dial could make us young again. When I stood, the room did not. The hallway stretched to the bedroom like a long, unkind promise. Behind the door, her breathing steadied into the rhythm of someone who has practiced sleeping beside their own secrets. I turned off the lights and sat in the dark living room, the couch remembering the shape of us. I pressed my fingers into the place where her legs used to tuck under mine. The hum of the refrigerator held the apartment together, the way a low note holds a song. In the dark, I unlocked the phone again. A message floated at the top like a leaf that refuses to sink. "Tomorrow, same place." I stared until the words lost their clothes and stood there. Tomorrow, same place. The room listened, as rooms do, without advice. I put the phone down, face against the table, like someone laying a stone on a grave they can't afford to visit. The night made room for morning, but not for sleep. The lock on the bedroom door clicked, not the way it usually did, but slowly, as if someone inside wasn't sure whether to keep me out or let me in. Morning arrived without deciding anything, gray light sliding into the room like a polite intruder. The city was already in motion, distant traffic humming like a mantra from another religion, coffee machines waking half the block. I stood at the window and watched the rain begin, the first drops organizing themselves into a grid of regret across the glass. She was quiet at breakfast, sleeves pulled over her hands as if fingers were too honest. We talked in the grammar of logistics, meetings, groceries, do you need the car? Truth stalked the edges like a stray dog, unsure which side of the street belonged to it. When she left, the door stuck for a second, then surrendered. The apartment exhaled her absence. Objects relaxed into their unguarded shapes. I moved through rooms like a ghost haunting his own decisions. I didn't search for evidence. Evidence had already found me. Still, there were traces. A receipt folded too neatly, perfume living in a scarf that wasn't her shade, a cab notification for a street we don't visit. Even the plant on the windowsill leaned a little too far toward the light, as if it had been told there was more of it somewhere else. Sleepless nights make everything echo. I heard the text tone from the safe, the water from last night, the click of the envelope opening and closing in my head. I made coffee and forgot to drink it, the smell taking me back to mornings when we didn't check our phones like lifelines. His name sat in me like a coin I couldn't spend, Elias. I tried to imagine him wrong to make it easier, but the messages refused to be villains. He sounded patient, worried, like someone trying not to move a wounded animal too quickly. I went to work and did the day like a body chore, emails, meetings, nods that didn't land anywhere. My colleagues' voices came muffled, as if I were underwater and they'd learned to breathe elsewhere. At lunch, I sat outside beneath an awning, watching rain make confetti of the city's confidence. I typed his name into search bars and then erased it. I wrote a message to her, "We need to talk," and didn't send it. Every choice was a door I couldn't make myself walk through. That night the bed became an agreement between two historians. She turned away gently, which is how kindness can be cruel. In the dark, I could feel her deciding nothing. Days stacked, and each one left an impression like a wet glass on wood. I found a napkin in her coat pocket with a line scrawled, "The small table near the window." Beneath it, a smudged heart that looked ashamed of its shape. The next afternoon, I walked to the cafe with the small tables near the windows, because sometimes the map refuses to be ignored. It was the kind of place that believes in second chances and oat milk, bell over the door modest as a throat clearing. The glass fogged with rain breath. Inside, people practiced the art of not looking at one another too closely. He was there. I knew him because grief knows its reflection even in strangers. Mid-30s, clean shirt, a watch that looked like it kept time gently. He kept glancing at the door, tapping his cup in a pattern that didn't quite make a rhythm. I sat 2 tables away, behind a vase pretending to be privacy. He pulled his phone out and typed, then stared at it as if it were a horizon. When he looked up, our eyes caught a mistake of fact. He stood, walked past me, paused. "Do we know each other?" he asked, voice careful, like a person trying not to touch a bruise. I shook my head, which was true in the way a dream forgets daylight. "Sorry," he said, and smiled with one corner of his mouth, humility traveling a short distance. He returned to his table, then left 5 minutes later, the bell over the door curtsying. I watched him go and stayed long after my coffee let go of its heat. That evening she came home late, hair damp from a rain she hadn't planned for, or maybe had. She didn't apologize for the hour, and I didn't ask. We stood in the kitchen like two magnets that had learned new poles. "I saw him," I said. The words landed between us like an honest mistake. Her face emptied and then refilled, a small tide. Why? She asked, as if the question belonged to both of us. I don't know, I said, which is the closest I could get to the truth. She leaned against the counter and pressed her palm to the edge as if taking its temperature. I haven't, it isn't, she stopped. The sentence sat on the floor, breathing. I found the phone, I added, quieter now, like a person closing a window to keep the weather out. Her eyes flickered, and for a moment I saw love, not for me or him, but for a life that wasn't hurting anyone yet. I'm sorry, she said, and it was not a strategy. It was a weather report. We didn't fight. What would we do with the broken pieces? She went to bed early. I stayed up and listened to Rain practice forgiveness against the glass. Sometime after midnight, a message came and I didn't read it. The next day I called in sick to work and cleaned the apartment in circles. I folded blankets into compliance, stacked books like reasons, wiped fingerprints from glass as if removing evidence of us. It felt like rehearsing for absence. Late afternoon, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, he was there, Elias, holding nothing, hands visible like a man at a border. He looked startled by how ordinary I was. I shouldn't have come, he said immediately. Probably not, I answered, because there are agreements at the far edges of honesty. We stood in the hall with the building's air, which smelled of paint and old resolve. Can we talk? He asked. Not about her, about us. The word us did a small, cruel trick in my chest. I let him in because it seemed worse to leave him in the hall, where neighbors might think we were selling something. We sat at the table like colleagues of a very personal business. He spoke first. I care about her. I didn't mean to, but I do. He looked at me the way people look at photographs of earthquakes, studying the damage without knowing the right expression. How long? I asked, and the question was both too much and not enough. Months, he said, not years. He waited for me to punish him with a word he hadn't heard before. Is she happy? I asked. He blinked and something human crossed his face like a soft animal. I don't know, he said. I think she's afraid of choosing the wrong silence. We both laughed once, a dry sound that couldn't find water. He stood to leave. I'll step back, he said, if that's what helps. Don't be noble, I said softly. It's too late for roles. When he reached the door, he hesitated. She's not cruel, he said, not to convince me, but to keep the room from deciding otherwise. I know, I answered, and surprised us both. After he left, the apartment felt like a stage after the audience goes home, lights too bright, props exhausted. I sat on the floor again, back to the safe, listening for a lock that wasn't there. I didn't cry. Sometimes grief prefers quiet rooms. The doorknob turned gently from the other side, her keys in the lock, pausing as if weighing whether the story would let her in. She stepped in with the kind of tired that doesn't live in muscles. It lives in choices. Rain left her hair darker, eyes reflective as if they'd been asked too many questions by the sky. She closed the door slowly, like someone leaving a church after deciding not to pray. I saw him, she said before I could. There was no anger in her voice, only the careful tone of a person knitting too far from the fire. He came by, I replied, and the apartment nodded, neutral ground marked and signed. We stood in the kitchen, the same place all our versions of us come to perform. I'm not good at this, she said, hands open, as if showing me the tools she didn't possess. Neither am I. Truth can be polite when it loses its appetite. I don't know how to make it right, she continued, looking past me toward the window, where Rain had become diligent, the glass a ledger of drops. It might not get to be right, I answered. Maybe it just gets to be honest. She nodded, eyes bright, not with tears exactly, but with unspent idioms. I tried to stop, she whispered, the words tasting like metal. I know, I said, and we both understood the poverty of that sentence. The refrigerator hummed like a chorus that forgot the words. She walked to the living room and sat on the edge of the couch, where the fabric remembers arguments by refusing to wrinkle. I sat across from her, hands on my knees like I was waiting for an interview with the person I'd already been working beside for years. For a while, we let silence draft a treaty. How did we get here? I asked finally. You don't ask that to go back. You ask it to find ground solid enough to leave from. I started hiding small things, she said, not because they mattered, because they didn't. And then they did. She told me about the first message, an accident of timing, a laugh that landed where attention was soft and unassigned. She told me about late afternoons when the building felt like a shell, and she didn't know how to live inside it with the person she loved and couldn't reach. She told me about wanting to feel seen without having to perform seeing back. There was no romance in the telling, which somehow made it worse and better. She wasn't defending herself, she was confessing to gravity. Elias did not appear as a villain or as a hero, but as a door she walked through to feel a breeze. Did you love him? I asked, and the question didn't break anything that wasn't already on the floor. I tried not to name it, she said. Names make things harder to return. And us, I asked, what do you name us? She took a long breath, the kind that borrows from tomorrow. History, she said softly. Home. A room with good light, even when we forget to open the blinds. The words hurt in a clean way, like alcohol. We talked until the room remembered how to hold us sitting so far apart. I told her about the letter, the phone, my nights orbiting a safe like a small moon. She told me about waking up with apologies in her mouth and not knowing which language they belonged to. At one point she reached for my hand and stopped, a gesture interrupted by its own honesty. I placed my hand on the table between us, an offering without expectation. She placed hers near it, close enough to draft warmth, far enough to respect the air. What do you want? I asked. She closed her eyes and the room waited. I want to stop hurting you, she said. I want to stop lying to myself. And him. She opened her eyes, and in them lived a quiet storm choosing whether to cross land. I told him I needed time, she said. He said he'd be where I could see him leave. We both recognized the line. It was the kind of sentence that thinks it's a solution because it's beautiful. In stories, I said, someone decides and then the rain stops. In life, she answered, the rain stops and someone decides because the light made them. Evening fell without ceremony. We made tea and didn't drink it, a ritual honoring effort. She stood, walked to the window, touched the cold glass like it could take a temperature. I don't think I can be who I was, she said. I don't think I can carry us alone, I replied. We were not arguing. We were reading the weather report aloud. She picked up her bag. The zipper sounded like a decision learning how to speak. I'm going to stay at my sister's tonight, she said. I don't want to make this house a battlefield. I nodded because agreeing felt like the only kindness left untouched. At the door, she turned. I'm sorry, she said again, and this time the word didn't ask for absolution. It just wanted to be a fact. I know, I answered, and we let the word be small and true. She left. The building's hallway took her in with its usual indifference. I stood in the quiet living room feeling like furniture that had finally understood arrangement is not the same as belonging. I walked to the safe without thinking, a ritual hand finds after church. The combination turned easily. The phone waited where paper keeps its secrets. I unlocked it and scrolled, not to wound myself, but to learn the shape of the decisions ahead. A new message glowed. I'll give you space. Tell me if you need me to disappear. I placed the phone back, closed the door, spun the dial until it forgot us. The apartment dimmed into itself, rain pausing like a breath between words. I turned off the last lamp and let the dark draw the outlines of everything we hadn't said. The next morning, sunlight edged the curtain, and for the first time in weeks, I reached for my ring and found the imprint but not the gold. Morning light arrived like a clean sheet laid over a tired bed. It touched the kitchen first, turning the steel sink into something almost ceremonial. The hum of distant traffic seemed softer, like the city was speaking from another room to give us privacy. I found the indentation where the ring had slept, a faint circle on my finger like a sun that had set but left its heat. I looked for it without urgency, not because it didn't matter, but because panic felt like the wrong language for this morning. On the windowsill, beside the plant that kept angling toward forgiveness, the ring waited in a small pool of light. I picked it up, and it was heavier than I remembered. Gold remembers beginnings, skin remembers duration. I held it to the window. The light walked through it and landed on the table in a perfect circle that I wished were a portal. I slid it into my pocket and felt my hand get older. The apartment smelled faintly of last night's tea and the kind of silence that doesn't ask for anything. I made coffee and drank it this time, letting bitterness do its honest work. Every swallow felt like a nod to a version of me that had finally put down a weight carefully. When she texted, "Can we?" said yes, because avoiding truth had made us experts in collisions. She arrived 10 minutes later, hair tied back, eyes clear in the way people's eyes get when they've chosen a direction. We sat at the table facing the window, allies in noticing weather. I think we should separate, she said, voice steady but low, as if speaking in a library where all the books were about us. I nodded. The word separate didn't slice. It unfolded, not as punishment, she added quickly, as a way to stop hurting this version. We discussed logistics, because love that's ending still needs groceries and rent and keys. I surprised myself by not bargaining with the past. She surprised me by not promising the future. At one point, she reached for my hand, and I let her take it. We sat like that, two people honoring the architecture even as they decommissioned the building. Her thumb traced the place where the ring had been. The gesture felt like both blessing and inventory. I forgive you, I said, not to win, but to stop losing. She closed her eyes, and a single tear chose the most direct route. I forgive us, she whispered, and the room seemed to approve. We packed a box together, mugs, shared books, a photograph of us on a beach where wind rehearsed erasing. We didn't fight over the photo. We set it on the mantel, a neutral country. When she lifted her coat from the hook, a movie ticket fell, 2 years old, a scene we'd forgotten. She smiled then, not happily, but tenderly, as if seeing a child off to school on a rainy morning. "Keep it," I said, "for when you need proof that this was once simple." She slipped it into her wallet like a small truce. We walked to the door and stopped, the way people do in hospitals and airports and thresholds. "I hope you find someone who chooses you without rehearsals," she said. "I hope you find a silence that tells the truth," I replied. Outside, the rain had calmed to a memory of rain, streets rinsed, voices carrying further in the cleaner air. On the landing, she turned and looked at me the way you look at a house one last time, making sure it will stand without you. She walked away without looking back, and it felt like respect. I closed the door gently, then opened the windows. Fresh air entered like a beginner, careful, sincere. The plant on the sill faced the light without apology. I took the safe from the closet and set it on the table. The dial turned with the familiarity of a story told too often. Inside. Passports, letters, the violet ring box, the phone now cool and irrelevant. I removed the phone, scrolled to the last message, his promise to disappear if needed, and typed, "No need, we've decided. Take care of yourself." I didn't mention her, I didn't mention me. I powered it off and placed it in the box with the ring, closed the lid, and locked the safe. Then I wrote a letter. "Thank you for loving me enough to tell the truth. I'm returning the ring not as an ending, but as an artifact. We were real, that's enough." I placed it with the letters from my father, ordinary and holy. I turned the dial until the numbers felt random and kind. The afternoon drifted lighter. I cleaned the table of imaginary sand, washed 2 mugs, left one to dry alone. I sat in the chair by the window, the empty chair across from me, not accusing, just accurate. The city kept moving. Someone laughed on the street, loud and unashamed, the way people laugh when they don't know they're a soundtrack. A child dragged a stick along the fence, making a rhythm that didn't belong to morning. Clouds separated and morning light returned for a second performance, softer, generous. I breathed, and it sounded like forgiveness when you stopped trying to pronounce it perfectly. I put the ring on the table, watched the light climb inside it again, then slid it into the drawer where the simple tools live. Love is a tool sometimes it's a museum. Evening found me on the couch with a blanket that remembered both of us without complaint. I picked up a book and read 1 page twice. Then I closed my eyes and listened to the room not lie to me anymore. When the rain began again, it didn't mean regret. It just meant weather. I whispered goodnight to no one and felt, briefly, accompanied. Sleep came like a friend arriving late, apologizing only with presence. Quiet ending. At dawn, the light touched the safe where it sat under the window, and for the first time, it looked like furniture instead of a secret. I made coffee and let the kettle sing without hurrying it.